Welcome back to The Bridge, a transformational health podcast with yours truly, Dr. Elizabeth Rogers. Hey, podcast family. Wow. I am so happy you're here as always today. And I hope you're ready because I have an incredibly extraordinary and brilliant guest, Dr. John Droz Jr. I'm very honored that I get to tell you that Dr. Droz is someone I consider a dear colleague and friend, and just one of the most brilliant people that I've ever met. Let me tell you about my amazing guest. John received undergraduate degrees in physics and mathematics from Boston College, a graduate degree in physics from Syracuse University, and has been a Mensa member. He worked as a physicist for GE Aerospace Electronics, Mohawk Data Sciences, and Monolithic Memories. After retiring at age 34, he's focused on educating citizens about technical issues ranging from climate to COVID and energy to education. His underlying concern is that these policies should be based on genuine science, which is what we're going to talk about today. But instead, they are often about political science, which guarantees inferior results. John has been a guest speaker on dozens of radio and TV shows nationwide, as well as lectured to numerous organizations on these issues, in addition to publishing more than 100 articles and reports. Among other things, John is on the North Carolina Oil and Gas Commission, is a member of the CO2 Coalition, the National Association of Scholars, and was the U.S. Ambassador for the Global Climate Intelligence Group. John is the founder of Alliance for Wise Energy Decisions, an international coalition promoting science-based climate and energy policies. His wiseenergy.org website focuses on wind and solar energy with the unusual emphasis of showing citizens how to defend their rights. John publishes the free Media Balance newsletter twice a month, and it covers a wide range of topics not adequately addressed by the mainstream media. His readership is over 10,000 worldwide. In late 2020, John was asked if he would put together a team of independent experts to analyze election data. He agreed to do that, and they have generated 10 major reports posted at electionintegrity.info. He has been very active in this space for some 2 years now. Consistent with his focus on genuine science, John also created a webpage on COVID-19, which I will post here, where his multiple COVID reports, videos, etc. are posted and accessible to all of you. John now posts weekly to his Substack space, which is free, not paid, where his commentaries discuss the importance of critical thinking about our societal issues, like the corruption of our kindergarten through 12th grade education system, which is going on almost unchecked. And that, my podcast family, is exactly what we are going to talk about today. And why are we going to talk about science today? Why are John and I talking about science and not something specifically related to health and well-being? Well, that's because part of being a healthy person is being empowered, being able to think critically for yourself so you can make sound and safe and healthy judgments and decisions. But if the basis of our knowledge is built on a foundation that is not honest and true, where are we? So we're going back to the basics today. Today is going to be like a real science class. This is so special to me. So please come on in close, listen up, grab some tea, cozy up, grab a blanket, hang out with John and I. All of the links that he mentions and that I've mentioned here related to his bio will be posted for you here in the show notes. But I really want you to start to think about this within the context of you and your life. Because, yeah, we are here to talk about transformational health, but the truth is that your transformational health is your life. It's your life. So really, this show is about life. It's not just about your health, because your health is your life. What kind of a life do we have if we don't have our health and well-being? And the truth is, what kind of a life do we have if we don't even realize that we've been trained not to critically think for ourselves, not to be skeptical, not to ask the important questions? So what I want you to do when you listen to this podcast is remember, first of all, that Dr. Droz and I are sharing a lot of times opinions based on our knowledge and education and experience. However, Dr. John and I are not here to impress upon you any certain set of beliefs or belief systems. What we're here to do is open your minds and give you an opportunity to decide what you think for yourself, to go start asking the questions, to go do your own research. I want you to be skeptical. We should never, ever believe that just because someone says something to be true because they have the credentials doesn't mean it is so. Just because you go to a doctor and they tell you this is the outcome that you will have 6 months to live. You will not do well. You just need to manage this. You cannot heal. There is no cure. Doesn't mean it's so. And this show is all about empowering you, about training you and teaching you and giving you all the tools, resources, and information possible so that you can decide for yourself and take your own power back. Welcome to The Bridge, the show that bridges the gap between Eastern and Western medicine, science and spirituality, physical and energetic health. If you're seeking to heal from within, ultimately achieving the pinnacle of health and well-being for your mind, body, and spirit, then rest assured, this show is tailored just for you. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Rogers. I'm a heart-centered, Harvard-trained epidemiologist, researcher, medical intuitive, and transformational health and longevity doctor. Basically, I find the clues that every other health practitioner misses because they're looking in the wrong place. Dr. Droz, we're going to call you John today on the show. I am so happy and honored, sincerely, to have you here. You know, this show is all about transformational health and well-being. And I think it is extremely important that we talk about science as it relates to our health and well-being, because our fundamental basis of knowledge as it relates to science has helped to shape our beliefs about health and well-being and a lot of other things in our life. So I would love to have a conversation about this with you today. And first, you and I both know that science has been used in negative and manipulative ways that have taken people's power away. And to me, part of being a healthy person is about being empowered, is about being able to critically think for yourself. But if the basis of our knowledge is built on a foundation that isn't honest and true, then where are we? So I feel like today you're going to help me take us back to the basics and talk about real science. So the first thing I'd love to ask you is, in your own words, how would you describe the important connection between basic science and health?
Well, thank you for having me on, Elizabeth. I would like to start before that. Make clear we know what we're talking about when we say the word science. We can't talk about science unless we're clear about what science is.
Correct.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors out there who try to manipulate science or manipulate people's understanding of what science actually is. The simplest, if you asked, did a poll of 100 man on the street people to say, what do you think about science? Is that a good or bad thing? The vast majority, or 90+%, would say they support science. Okay,
Yeah.
So science has a very favorable rating, if you will. So if you ask the same people a second question to say, okay, you are in favor of science, you think it's a good thing, blah, blah, blah. Tell me what it is. And I think you'd find that 90+% of people would not be able to come up with a good definition. So that's sort of an interesting dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
People like something, but they don't understand what it is. So that doesn't happen all that often. But
No.
So my view is that most people think of science, they think of equations and
Correct.
things like that, which
The scientific method.
Yes. So those things have something to do with science, but the best definition I know as a professional scientist of what science is that science is a process. Okay, so see, that has nothing to do with theorems or equations or anything like that here. It's a
No.
process. So what is a process? Well, it's really a process about trying to learn about the truths of our existence, the
Mm.
material truths here. Okay, we're not talking about theological things,
Oh, I
but
love
the
that.
material truths of our existence here. I mean, how does that happen if I take a ball, I drop it, and it bounces on the floor? How does that happen? Why doesn't it just stay there when I let go? That's something that our planet, our existence here has matter we now call gravity. Well, they didn't always know that. That's
Yeah.
what we accept now as knowledge, but that wasn't always known.
No.
Anyway, so the whole idea is that we have a process for that. Science is a process to try to understand these type of things, to get to the thing. So as to get to better understanding of our reality here, of the material things of our reality. So what has proven to be the most effective methodology for doing that is, as you cleverly snuck in there, is the scientific method. You know how long the scientific method has been around for? I told you this already, so you probably
Yes,
got it.
I want you to tell our guests or our listeners because I have a feeling now I'm a big nerd in when it comes to public health, medical history. So because I'm into that stuff, I've known that for, that it stems back to way before I think anybody realizes. So tell us how long the
I did
scientific
some
method has
research
been
on
around.
this because I was interested in knowing when the origins actually initiated, and surprisingly, it was in ancient Egypt that they have been able to identify the first origins of the scientific method. So it isn't 300 years ago or 400 years ago, it's
Nope.
more like 4,000 years ago. Obviously they didn't start out with the scientific method, but they had the origins of what the scientific method evolved into, started at that time. So roughly 4,000 years ago, 2000 BC was the origins of what today we call the scientific method. And obviously it's been tweaked and modified as time's going on here. But the scientific method is a relatively simple but straightforward process. That's what we're looking for here
Yep.
for testing things as to the accuracy of somebody makes a claim and says, if I do X, Y, Z, ABC will happen. Well, okay, so let's check that out.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, let's set up an experiment or whatever. So in the beginning, what starts off when people speculate on something, like I just said, that's what's called
Hmm.
a hypothesis. That's just a guess, basically. I
Right.
think XYZ will happen when I do ABC. Fine. That's fine. So the question is that true or not? So then they do some properly designed tests, and that's what the scientific method is about, is to try to give you some hints as to what a properly devised test would amount to. And then you see whether, in fact, it works out. Now, two things happen. If it does not work out, well, then either there's something the matter with your test or there's something the matter with your hypothesis.
Hmm.
So you can go back and re-examine those more closely and say, okay, here was the problem. My hypothesis should have been more narrowly defined, for instance, than I
Yes.
originally said. I'm going to put some conditions on it or
Mm.
whatever. So that's really, in a simplified fashion, what science is all about: trial and error, but through actual real world. That's a key thing here. Now, I won't ask you, because I know you
Yes.
know, but the synonym for real world evidence is empirical. So that's what these scientific method is contingent upon. In fact,
Yes.
there are four conditions. So scientific method is one thing. So the second thing that I like to refer to is called the scientific analysis. Well, there's actually four conditions for scientific analysis. Okay, here we go. Four conditions. So the first thing is, for a proper scientific analysis, it needs to be objective.
Yes.
If you start out with a presumed result and you skew the test, let's say, to assume a certain result, you're not being fair. You're cheating.
No, you're not.
So we need objectivity. So you got to have a start with a clean slate. Say, look, I've got to be open to any possibility here. Blah 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 blah. So that word isn't in the vocabulary of your buddy on your shirt there, for instance.
No, it is not. And that is one of the most important things about science. And I'm so grateful that you are bringing it down to this basic level for us. This is so important. So
the second part of a proper scientific analysis is comprehensive. So comprehensive means that we can take a little tiny snapshot of something and look at it closely, but then we tend to sort of generalize it to say, well, it applies across the board here.
Yes.
Well, that's true. So to actually assess whether, for instance, let's say a real world thing here, does a COVID vaccine work? Well, just because I tested on one person and it works doesn't mean it's going to work on a million other people who have.
Correct. In epidemiology, we tend to use the word generalizable. And is that result going to be applicable to the rest of us?
So that's what the merits of comprehensive is. If you want to make a more general statement, you have to have your analysis be more comprehensive. So objective, comprehensive. The third is empirical. That's why I brought into this here, because we were talking. In other words, we need to have real world evidence here. Real world. Now, a perfect example of this is violated all the time. For instance,
it is.
You talk to people who are promoters of wind energy, for instance. They say, well, we need to have wind energy because it's necessary to save the planet from this imminent catastrophe. Well, putting that aside, whether that's true or not, the question is, what is your evidence that wind energy will make a material contribution here?
Correct.
Well, if you ask them that, they say, well, here's some studies we've got that show that. So, but if you look at the studies, all of the studies are based on computer modeling. In other words, that violates the condition here of
correct.
Now, there are some times where computer modeling is appropriate, but never in a case where you actually have empirical data. Why would you do a computer model when you actually have data? So, for instance,
correct.
This little example I'm giving.
I love this example.
100,000 wind turbines in existence in the world today. So we have tons of actual real world empirical data about what they do regarding CO2. Tons of real data.
Yes.
Why would we go to a computer model and say, let's model all this? Well, the one reason why is because the empirical evidence doesn't support the hypothesis. That's why.
Correct.
I'm trying to make a real world example here. Okay, so the first thing is objective, comprehensive, empirical. The fourth is, could you tell what the fourth is, or do you want me to keep going?
I want you to keep going.
Okay. Very clever, Elizabeth. The fourth criteria that's essential to have a genuine scientific analysis is transparency.
And that is very important. Transparency, wow.
You said that 4 times. All 4 of them are important, right?
Yes.
Transparency means that we actually have the data. And that's a lot of what this, let's say, this trial was about between Stein versus Mann here just recently. Dr. Mann, I might say, is claiming that his hockey stick graph adequately describes the world as far as climate. So when you ask him for, okay, let's see the data, initially, for years, he refused to provide any data. He says, take my word for it. What the hell? What do you mean take your word for it? Right. And then second of all, when he came up with the data, it was pretty weak. And that was why, of course, he didn't want to show it in the first place here. So we need to have transparency. So when people make claims here, fine. We hear what you're saying. Show us the data that confirms this. So those 4 points here are really significant matters. Yeah. If we want to have a bona fide scientific analysis of something, we need to have it be objective, comprehensive, empirical, and transparent. It doesn't mean any one or more of those things here. It's not science.
Yes.
So when Dr. Fauci or whoever else stands up and say, we have to have vaccines here, let's just say, okay, then say, okay, show us the data that's objective, comprehensive, empirical, and transparent that
supports that statement. That's simple.
Well, they don't. No one's asked them that. And when they have, they are evasive. But whatever. What we're explaining here is what science is.
Right.
Those two things together, in my view, are the best description of what science is. Science is a process, and scientific analysis has those four elements. So if you combine those two things together and understand that, you're well on your way to having a very sophisticated understanding of science.
And those two things, I don't believe were taught with clarity anywhere along the path of our education unless we decide unless you are one of those of us who decide to specifically go into a career in science or research. And I would hope that today they are still being taught the scientific method with those specific criteria in mind.
Of course, nothing like that is remotely happening. We already know that. You do know
And
that, right?
I do know that. And that's why I was making that statement, because I wanted to lead that into, our next point, which is, as you said, unfortunately, that's not what's happening today inside the walls of our educational system. And I think that's why one of the many reasons why this conversation that we're having is so incredibly important, because I don't think a lot of people even realize that this is going on. So now we know that even the terms science, and you and I've talked about I'd love to have you talk to us about this, the confusion, or, those terms science and scientist, along with their definition, often getting misused and misinterpreted. But now we have established this context as we consider our own science education and that of our children. So I would love to ask you, as you've already implied, there are some gaps in what we are now being taught inside of the walls of our schools when it comes to science education. Can you tell us how this process has been distorted by people over time?
Okay, well, let's go back to the first point you made, which is a very important one, and that is a lot of people confuse science with scientists. They think the two things are synonymous. So they think if a scientist is saying it, that's science. Well, that's not true. So let me give you two examples. I like trying to use analogies. One is to say everything a lawyer does is a definition of what law is. Well, no. There's plenty of lawyers that are off the reservation here and have perverted or ignored the law here. They're doing their own thing for self-serving reasons. So just because a lawyer does something, doesn't make it legal or the law. Same thing in the religious area. Every priest is not an exemplary of the religious statutes that he is supposedly upholding. Most of them are, but there's plenty of them that aren't because of whatever reason, self-serving reason.
Right.
So the two are not synonymous. Priest is not synonymous with the religion he is here. He's maybe a human person who has some continuity to it, but the two things are not synonymous. So there's many scientists who, and unfortunately more today than ever, that are off the reservation, as the example I used. I don't know, is that a pejorative term?
Yeah.
There's many scientists who have lost track of their commitments, let's put it that way, to be what science is or whatever. And the reason is that they have become activists. And they have decided that, our society needs to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And then when science doesn't cooperate with them in supporting their XYZ objective, they say, the heck with it, I'm going that way anyways.
Yeah.
Well, so they are definitely now doing unscientific things, but to the public doesn't realize that they have deviated into unscientific territory, and they say, well, this guy's got 2 PhDs here.
Right. So he must be right.
Like that shirt guy. Say, look at all the credentials. Look at how many peer-reviewed papers he's written, blah, 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 blah. So therefore, well, this is what in philosophy is called an appeal to authority. So just because I have 3 degrees and I've written 200 papers, whatever, doesn't mean I'm right.
No.
Okay, I may be right about certain things, but there's a lot of other things I may be wrong about.
Yeah.
So we need to examine, go back to the whole idea here. I said, let's look at your things you're saying under these 4 criteria and stuff like that. But most people don't do that because they don't understand that. They just say, okay, this guy got up there, he's got all these credentials, so he says it, so that must be right.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, that's just not true. So the situation is that this has happened more recently. It didn't used to happen that much here, but over the last 40 years or so, 30 years, this has happened more because of a variety of reasons. We'll go off track here a little bit, but
Yeah.
one of the reasons is because of our the degradation of our theological connections. Putting that in a obtuse way.
That's a great way to say it.
We have, if you look at things like, I don't know, church attendance, let's just say 50 years ago and today here, and all sorts of things related to theology here, we've gone downhill, in my view. And there's some rationale for that. I mean, for instance, some people would say, well, I used to be Catholic, but I see these priests become pedophiles, whatever, so therefore I'm no longer a Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of like saying, to me, in my opinion, saying I used to be a U.S. citizen, but I looked at some of the presidents we had who were buffoons. I'm no longer going to be a U.S. citizen.
I like that.
That's just stupid.
I like that. That's a good example.
The U.S. is based on the Constitution, for instance. That's what the United States is about. And let's say the Catholic Church is based on the New Testament, as an example, and the things that Jesus Christ, whatever. So that hasn't changed one iota here. Just because some individual or individuals have perverted it, distorted it, not done it, whatever, that has nothing to do with what's right or wrong here.
Yeah.
Same thing for the United States. Just because we have somebody or people who have done a poor job, that doesn't undermine the value of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, all these kind of other things that our country is built on. None of that's changed one iota. So what's happened over this time period is that less and less people here are, I don't know, theologically appreciative or
even connected. I feel like, do you feel like that? I sometimes feel like it's just a general disconnection and that I see.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for this. I'm just giving a couple of reasons. I mean, just like things like the internet, where we're just bombarded with baloney.
So connection, you're right.
So often there's some good things, but there's a lot of other baloney. And people are just overwhelmed with this and say, enough already. So my view, one thing I didn't say in my education, I went to Catholic schools my entire life, up till the end.
So did my husband.
A grammar school. It was nuns, Sisters of St. Joseph's, and then brothers in high school, brothers, Xaverian brothers, and then Jesuits at Boston College. And then when I went to Syracuse University, that was the first time that I departed. But by that time, the die was set, fortunately. So anyways, the fact that we have, as a society, diluted our religious convictions here is a bad sign. Our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And that's one of the reasons we were successful. And I personally believe God was helpful, just like this Battle of Saratoga.
Yes.
That all things being equal would never have happened. We believe that God has a handle on these type of things. So why am I connecting all this? Well, the fact is that humans, by definition, in my view, need to have some type of spiritual connection, whether it's a conventional religion or whatever, because everyone says, at one point or another, why am I here for?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of my life here and so forth?
Yeah.
Well, without a religion is a place that gives you an answer for that. If you're a Christian, for instance, you say, I'm here to work towards the next life here, for instance. But if you scrap all that and say, well, I'm just here for whatever I'm going to make out of it today, well, that's sort of not satisfactory in a lot of ways. And so because of this void, when they take out the religion here, what's happened is that there's other things that have stepped in to try to fill this void. And one of them that's the most nefarious, sorry for using a multi-syllabic word there, but
I like that.
one of the things that's worse is relativism. Relativism is really a bad thing in that it basically says there are no absolute values. My values are whatever I decide they are. Your values are whatever I decide you are. Everybody's values are relative to whatever you think. Well, once you go down that path there, that's not a good path to go down here. So why am I going on this long-winded explanation? Well, the reason is that this is what's happening with science, and
Yes.
scientists particularly. These scientists who have abdicated science are saying and doing unscientific, aka stupid things, and the reason is that they are relativists. And the rationale they're using, which is a relativist rationale, is things like the end justifies the means.
Yes.
That isn't a Judeo-Christian principle. They say, no, the end doesn't justify the means here. But people who are not Judeo-Christians say, well, yes, that doesn't matter what I do or how many people I have to kill or screw over in the process here. If I get to a good end, that makes it all worthwhile. So the same thing applies to these scientists who are saying and doing stupid, aka unscientific things. They're saying, okay, fine, I'm violating the tenets of science, blah 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 blah, but it's for a good cause.
Right.
And that was part of what this trial was, Stein versus Mann here. That Stein was saying about Mann here, you made all sorts of scientific violations here. Mann was saying, I'm working for a good cause. Simplifying it a little bit, but I mean, that's sort of what it was about here. So that's why we have the relativism is a relatively recent thing to take hold. So that's one of the reasons why this science versus scientist is a relatively recent phenomena.
It is
happening here, and why it's important for citizens to understand just because a scientist or even a group of scientists gets up and says something doesn't make it science.
Thank you.
Okay, it was a long-winded explanation about a simple question. What was the rest of your question?
Well, we were heading into taking this to talking about what's going on now inside the walls of our schools.
Okay, so the bad guys, I'm going to use that term on purpose pejoratively, that who in my view, everything I'm saying here is my opinion here, okay, so I'm not going to say,
of course,
I'm expressing my opinion, are progressives. These are people who have more of a left-oriented ideology. In other words, they think they are more atheistic-oriented, they're more communist-oriented, all these type of things. That is my opinions, that these people are against America, American democracy, things of that nature. And so they realize that the best way to undermine it is to go about it through the school system, the education system. Now, one of the things they do differently that is maybe hard for a lot of people to understand, but it's a significant thing, and that is they play the long game. See, most Americans are used to fairly quick, not immediate satisfaction.
Right.
Go out and buy a new car today or whatever. All these things have to be done shorter.
Now.
So say someone says, I have a plan here to get an end result, but it's going to take me 10 years to do. Most people say, the hell with that.
And say, oh, no. What can we make it happen now? Yeah.
Right. Well, that little distinction right there between short term and long term is a really big deal.
It is.
And so these people are playing the long term game, and because most Americans think of things in the short term, they aren't even aware of it.
Yes.
So what their long term plan was to infiltrate our education system. And then when they looked at all of the subject areas, I'm giving my opinion here now, they decided that science was the most important one to infiltrate. So, in my opinion, what they decided to do was to do a trial run of, we're talking about K through 12 here.
Right.
Of course. What they decided to do is say, let's do a trial run on something that's important, but of secondary importance. So we are going to propose a program called Common Core.
Common Core.
So Common Core was mostly about English, some math, stuff like that. That wasn't their real objective. This is my view here, that their real objective was to get to science, but they wanted to do a trial balloon here to say, let's try changing the education, the K through 12 education system in America here by trying in a different area that isn't our primary. It has some importance, but it's not our primary area. And then when we learn from that as to how we go about it, who our allies really are, blah, 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 then we can utilize that knowledge and go after science, which was our real objective. That was their plan, in my opinion. So that started almost 20 years ago, a little shy of that. And they did Common Core, and the experiences, they had some success there. They had some failures. They learned a lot from that. So in about 2011, something like that, 10, 11, they said, okay, we know enough here now about this, so we're now going to attack our real goal here, and that is to undermine the science education in K through 12. So they did a two-part thing here. First is they came up with a document called the Framework. It's a long name, but I'm just calling it the Framework. It's online. You can see it, still there. And this is about 20 progressives. They have their names as to who it was. They were proud of this.
Mm-hmm.
So this framework document is about, I don't know, I forget the exact number, 450 pages, something like that, of text about what they were doing and why. Well, they didn't tell you everything, what they're doing and why, but that was the theory, that whatever, that they're saying, here's our explanation. So it's a longhand explanation. So after they did that, then they, about a year or so later, then they took the information that they were trying to convey in this framework and put it in a format that states would understand, state departments of education, and that's called the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards. But that's a formatted type of set of information that's really what's in the framework. So if you really want to understand it, it's easier to read the framework.
Yeah.
So the framework has several things about it that are, to me, stand out. So we're limited time here, but I wrote a report about this, and on your website you can list the report. And
I'm going to do that for everybody. Absolutely.
But a couple of the major ones that were important is critical thinking. In my view, the most important objective of our whole education system should be to produce critical thinking graduates. If they aren't able to be critical thinkers, what have we got? Someone who's trained to, do what? Doesn't matter what it is, whether they're a doctor or a machine operator. If they aren't a critical thinker as a human being, they're in trouble. And I can tell you even more so today with AI and all sorts of other things that are going on today here. It's
Oh, yeah.
imperative that you be a critical thinker.
Yes.
So you say, okay, what did they say in this 450-page polemic here about critical thinking? And the answer is essentially nothing. Second thing is, okay, where is critical thinking taught in school? Where should it be taught? And the answer is in the area of science. And the reason why is because scientists by nature are people who ask questions. They say things like who, when, why, how, where, and so forth. Well, that's a lot of what critical thinking is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not taking things that are given to you at face value, but questioning. So that's why science, all the topics in K through 12, is the appropriate place to teach critical thinking. So the fact that in this science set of standards, critical thinking is not even mentioned, basically, much less taught or defined, not that, is an extraordinary omission. Second thing is when we look at this favorite we talked about, scientific method, 4,000 years here, ironically, it turns out that they have decided, these progressives have decided to scrap the scientific method. Now, how could 20 people or thereabouts decide arbitrarily on their own in their own dark room to throw out a 4,000 years of successful scientific processing methodology? What? Well, they don't deal with this very much, which is for good reason on their side, because it would be embarrassing for them to. But they have one sentence in there that is very hard to find, but I found it. And it says their reason for dumping the scientific method was because it promotes linear thinking. First of all, linear thinking is not a bad thing. So even if it did, that would not be a bad thing.
It wouldn't be a bad thing, not a bad thing to think.
Second of all, that isn't true. It's a false statement besides. I'm just telling you what they say. So these 20 or so people, without announcement, without explanation, without public discussion, without any proof or evidence, threw out 4,000 years of history by a stupid explanation like that. It promotes linear thinking. Well, this is how bad this is. So I said, for sure, there's going to be all sorts of people who have objected to this. I'm going to see teachers objecting, parents objecting, scientists objecting, organizations here objecting, American Medical Association is going to object, whoever. Well, who would say throw out the scientific method? No, none of that. I did all sorts of research. I couldn't find anyone that stepped up here and said this. This shows how bad it is here. That if such a fundamental thing to our society, the scientific method is just trashed by a group of self-appointed experts here who have nothing to do with what's in our best interest, and no one objects to it.
Right.
Okay, one third thing here. So I'll wrap this up on this part here. That's another question is what's in there. I was talking about two things that aren't in there. So like I said, there's one thing that, as an example, what's in there is not so good, and that is they have an entire chapter, which is like 20-some pages on this framework on equity. Okay, so first of all, this is about science. So the question is, why would there be even a mention, much less a 20-page full chapter on equity in science? How is that relevant?
Right.
Second of all, put this in context. 20 pages on equity, 0 on critical thinking. 20 pages on equity, 0 on the scientific method.
And I think one of the other scary things, John, that I want to just mention is that I think there were a lot of scientists, myself included, that were unaware this was even happening to us.
Well, I'm sure that's true about a lot of things. But what can I tell you?
Yeah.
So let's continue on that same thing. There's another killer point here. And that is that a lot of people would say, okay, fine. So a bunch of academics don't like the scientific method, don't like critical thinking, and they're big fans of equity. So what? What's news about that?
Right.
Well, what's news about that is that this was their plan to infiltrate the entire education system of the United States, K through 12 here. So what they did is they got together a team, a tag team, a tag team, is it, of I don't use the word experts, but they're going to call it experts. So
It's
what
hard
they
to use
did
the
is
word.
they put on a dog and pony show to my knowledge, every single state board of education in the United States. That's 50. Every state has a state board of education. That state board of education controls basically what is taught in the schools. Let's keep it simple as that. But that's essentially what happens. Every state has little tweaks of its own. But essentially, the state board of education, like in North Carolina, where I live, it's 18 people. Okay, these are appointed by the governor or whoever. But they decide three things. They decide what standards there are for every year and every subject. So science, what's being taught in science in grade 8, they decide that. Number 2, they approve textbooks for every year, every subject. So they approve a textbook for grade 8 for science, but it's consistent with their standards. And number 3, they also approve statewide tests. So every so often, students are tested for competence, whatever. Well, this starts at the State Board of Education. So these people have a significant amount of authority here.
Yes.
Not the local school. They are reflecting what's on the State Board of Education. So anyways, these people knew this. Part of what they learned is through their Common Core experience. And so they went around and had a dog and pony show to every one of these 50 states, to my understanding. And they had a team of an impressive team here. So they had some scientists that were part of the process here. They had some business people that were part of Bill Gates's Achieve organization. They were saying, okay, we're industry supporting this. They had teachers union people here that were saying, okay, this is the way to go, blah, 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 blah. So they had everything covered. So then when they went to these state boards, they came across as a very polished, very sophisticated, very competent. I know this partly because I know at least 2 people who were on different state boards, and they told me exactly what happened. They were there when it happened. Okay. So I asked these people, I said, okay, so these people had this slideshow and all saying NGSS was the greatest thing since sliced bread, blah, 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 blah. I said, did anybody object to anything in the NGSS? No. Wow. I said, did anybody even read the NGSS? They said, well, they gave it to us, we perused it here. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo here. So, no. So I said, did anybody, was any of these major changes that they made here, like scrapping the scientific method, was that even mentioned? No. They weren't going to mention it. Now, if a SBOE member knew it and brought it up, well, they would have had, I'm sure they had a bunch of stock answers like, well, we're trying to have linear thinking, stuff like that. But no, none of these things come up here. So saying, is this just an academic matter? The bottom line is, as of today, Elizabeth, 49 states have bought into this crap. Florida's the only holdup. 49 states have either entirely adopted the NGS or mostly adopted.
Wow.
49 states of the United States have capitulated to this left-wing, progressive abomination of science. I don't know what else I can tell you.
No, and it's really frightening, and I'm just really grateful you're here because it's important that everyone out there listening understands this. And those are our children, inside those schools.
Well, it's worse than that, Elizabeth. I'd say there's one perspective I'd like to leave you with here. How much time we got here anyways?
Oh, I'm honestly, I'm good for another hour. So
okay, well, I'm probably not. I'm an old person.
That's fine. I'm just letting you know not to feel rushed, and you take your time. We'll wrap up when you need to.
In my view, trying to put in perspective how bad this is. Well, let me ask you this question since you've been so quiet here.
Please.
No, that's contrary to your normal inclination. every year, how many students do you think graduate from United States high school?
From
All
high
private,
schools.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
gosh, hundreds of
high school
thousands of
graduate.
kids.
Let's have a number.
Okay,
Yeah.
from the entire country, how many kids
Yes.
graduate every year
Yes, and from
from
high
high
school,
school?
all schools, private and public. So yes, how many
Oh
graduates do we have
boy.
a year?
Graduates, 12th grade. Oh boy. Well, at least a million. Are there a million 12th graders in the world? I feel like there've got to
In
be
the
more.
world, you just stuck it in the
Or
world.
in the United States. Even more. 2, 3, 4.
It's about 4 million is what it is.
Really?
Every year, approximately 4 million students graduate from all high schools in the
It's
United
a lot of
States.
kids.
Now, what I'm telling you is that I'm being conservative. Let's say only 75% of them are propagandized. And I'm saying that's ridiculously low because
Yeah.
it's more like 95%. But even if that was the case, that would mean there'd be approximately 3 million graduates every year that are left-wing propagandized people who are in short order becoming voting citizens.
Yes.
3 million a year. Now, since the last 10 years of this, that's 30 million left-leaning propagandized citizens that are voting. 30 million.
And as you say this, John, it starts to, I hope for everybody listening, really put into context the bigger picture here of the impact that this has. It's not just a direct impact on us, it's our future.
Right.
And I know that you have specifically done some work to be supportive in helping us make change in this area in the state of North Carolina. And if you feel you have time, I'd love for you to share that. If not, I know that you just came out with a brand new Substack article, which I strongly encourage all of our listeners to go sign up for, and you'll be able to access the link in our show notes. But you came out with a really great Substack article today called Utilizing the Power of School Choice, which I love the title of because to me, I feel like my show and this conversation, especially, are all about helping people take their power back. And this is exactly what you are empowering others to do in this article. You highlight in the article that while school choice is actually much more widely adopted now, that and some states have general subsidies for parents who opt out of the public school system. But unfortunately, there's a lack of guidance telling parents exactly how to utilize that power. So you actually created an incredible checklist for people to use to do exactly that.
I've missed other people doing it. My Substack, which is free, that's an important thing you didn't say. A lot of people charge
Yes,
for their Substack. So make sure you put that on your webpage here, free.
I will. Everyone,
I've written
please go
about
sign up
education
for
quite
it.
a few times, and
Mhm.
thank you for bringing up the latest one, which I think is a big deal.
It is a big deal. I read it before we started today.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I did have success working in North Carolina here to get the school system to agree to reinstate teaching the scientific method. Well, that was a big deal because 49 states have done it. Now it's 48 in that regard. And they didn't want to do it. They weren't, this wasn't something that they volunteered to do, but they argued with me and I argued back to them, and they realized that my arguments were stronger than theirs. They had no reason for getting rid of it. Neither's any of these other 48 states that have gotten rid of it. So anyways, I was successful in that. So they officially reintroduced the scientific method back in July of 2023. So that's something I posted on my Substack to explain how I did it. And
Yeah.
other people asked me how they could do it. So I outlined what needed to be done in other states. So That's the type of things I write in my Substack, typically maybe once a week or so.
And they're excellent. And I've been a subscriber now for many years. I read every single one, I have to tell you. And I know you have heard this feedback a lot from your readers, but even as somebody that, I am a scientist, I have a different, a deeper understanding of some of these things going on. I cannot express in words the amount I have learned from you and your Substack. So please, everybody, go sign up. It's extremely important. And John, like he said, I wanted to thank you for sharing in brief about the story in North Carolina. For those of you out there who are interested in making change, he has outlined the steps he took. And I do know the story. He's already told me, in prior conversations, just when he and I talked as friends. So I do know and understand the story in depth and what he has done. And it's certainly something that any one person is capable of. And I think, John, the story of what you achieved in North Carolina, I think we talked about this once before, but it emphasizes that one person can make a difference, because I want everyone listening to understand that John was just one person. He did not have an army of people or attorneys with him. He went to do this on his own and he achieved the goal. So please don't think out there that if you're just one person listening, that you're powerless, because you're far from it. And you're, as one person, extremely powerful. Know that you do have power to make a change. And John has provided those resources, and you'll be able to find them in his Substack.
Thank you. That is a good point. Surprisingly, and even conservative organizations helped me out. They all said, when I called them and said, here, I need some help, they all said, we support what you're doing, but we're too busy, essentially.
But I'm glad you shared that with us, because it's a reminder to people that don't let that stop you, because you could have just thought, all right, well, I'm just going to give up because nobody's going to be supportive.
I'm not the type of person that gives up too easily, ordinarily.
I'm not either. I'm extremely tenacious. I was told once in my doctoral program that my tenacity was one of my most admirable traits. So I love that we share that in common. Yes, no, not me. Me either. Never. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap things up here?
Yes. I want to ask you one last question. And John, I ask, just so you know, this is a question I ask to every single one of my guests. And just to give you a brief context, the reason I ask is because back when I was working in very traditional mainstream epidemiological research, I worked at a Centers for Disease Control Prevention Research Center. And I worked with a program for a number of years called the 10 Keys to Healthy Aging, which, if I tell you what they are and knowing who they were developed by, you will laugh, because now I know that they're not really keys to anything. There's one key in there that's maintaining social contact. And I think that is extremely important. As we all continue to age, I think social support is really important. But the question that I love to ask all of my guests now, as I collect data to really decide, to really help us find what the keys to healthy aging are, if there were such a thing. If there were, 10 keys to optimal health and longevity, what would you say one of them is?
Well, one of the things that's, I think, been very beneficial to me in life is perspective. There's lots of times we're confronted with problems.
Yeah.
And it's easy to be overwhelmed with the problem and say, this is a lot of work, blah, 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 blah. I seem to have the ability to be able to sort of stand back from something and see it in a bigger perspective. But if you're sort of upfront to it, you lose that ability and probably would more likely be inclined to, whether to give up or do something ineffective or whatever. But I think perspective, putting things in perspective is a powerful strategy for dealing with challenges in life, which by definition means being a healthier, happy person.
Yeah. I love that so much. And that is certainly a brand new perspective that I've been given today.
No one else has ever told you that?
No, no.
Well, there you
So
go. So I
thank
must be all
you.
wet.
John, this has been one of the most special few hours of my life. Spending this time with you is really important and special and valuable to me. And knowing that now we get to share this conversation with the rest of the world that will be available forever for anyone to find, to learn from you, to be empowered by you, and everything you shared today. I don't know how to put into words the gratitude I feel. And I just want to say thank you so much for your generosity with your time and your wisdom and your knowledge and your energy today. I certainly don't take it for granted. So thank you with all my heart.
Well, I appreciate you being open-minded and encouraging and positive. Those are all good
Thank
things too.
you.
So
I appreciate you so much, John. I'm sending you off with just lots of love, gratitude, and positive energy. And thank you so much on behalf of everybody that's going to listen to this now and in the future.
my pleasure.
Wow. I really feel strongly that this episode is so critically important to all of us, to all of you, and to this show. I just feel like we need a little moment of wrap up here. I want to make some important takeaway notes here that I just want to emphasize here for all of you. First, I want you to remember Dr. John talking about how science is a process, it is not a dogma. It is a process. And in sharing the four conditions necessary for a scientific analysis and how to apply them to evaluate research, I want you to remember that now you have been given tools to be able to go out and start to analyze and interpret those types of studies for yourself. Because as we all know, I could go out there right now and look up, for example, is coffee good for my health? And I could find dozens of studies, most likely, telling me one thing is true. And I could find other studies telling me that and something else entirely is true. How do you know the difference? And just because you hear somebody get on television or the radio, on some sort of media source, social media, on a podcast, whatever, and say that they are speaking a truth, it's not a good idea to just blindly believe those people, including me, just because we have a certain number of publications, degrees, or credentials behind our names does not make us scientists. Honest, trustworthy, reliable, does not make what they are saying something that you should believe, does not make what they're saying true. So I want you to really start to take those four conditions and apply them to your real life. Do the homework. When you hear of something that is being touted as a fact on from any source whatsoever that you're consuming, don't just simply believe it at face value. Go do the homework yourself. Now you have the conditions needed for a scientific analysis. And I encourage you to go back and re-listen to that because there's so much more in all of this. And I really hope that you will take away from all of this that we are not here today. I think I shared this in the intro to impress upon you our beliefs, opinions. We are here to encourage you to ask questions, think critically, be skeptical, and decide what you think for yourself. And a couple of things I want to mention. Dr. Droz mentions at one point in the podcast, the guy on my shirt, who right now I am going to leave a mystery, and I will wear this shirt again. And I will tell you exactly who is on my shirt and who he's referring to as a potential bad guy in the science world. And he also mentions the Battle of Saratoga, which I just want to share with you all. prior to our podcast interview, because we're dear friends and colleagues, we were just chit-chatting, and I'm somebody that loves to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, that I can just learn from and absorb from. And so Dr. John and I were talking about history, and he was teaching me a little bit about the importance of the Battle of Saratoga in the American Revolution, and how without the Battle of Saratoga, that the United States today wouldn't likely exist had it not happened the way that it happened. So I just wanted to share that little historical tidbit with you all today. So I'm really excited to hear your feedback. Please share it with us. John has already offered, like I said, to come back to talk about this and other topics. And I really hope we've empowered you to go do some homework, find out what's going on with the scientific curriculums in your communities, and know now that you as one person can go out and make a change and a difference if that's something that you feel called to do. Remember that all of this has everything to do with your optimal health and well-being. I will see you next time. I hope you all can feel the love and positive energy that I'm sending through the airwaves today. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to The Bridge, a transformational health podcast with yours truly, Dr. Elizabeth Rogers. If you enjoyed the show today, it would mean so very much to me if you subscribe to the show and leave an honest, positive review. You can easily subscribe by going to the upper right-hand corner of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and press the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner. Also, be sure to sign up for my email list and join our private community to get even more content, value, and support on your health and well-being journey. You'll find these links in the show notes. Sending you so much positive and supportive energy today. I really hope you can feel it.